Hello, everyone. Welcome to our St. Paul Learn with the League. I'm Heidi Klumpkin. I'm moderating tonight's presentation from Escape to Leadership 50 Years of Hmong in Minnesota. Many thanks to the Roseville and White Bear Lake area leagues for their support of our programs. Please check out their websites and the programs that they do as well. Also, thank you to the St. Paul Neighborhood Network and Suburban Community Channels for taping and broadcasting our presentations. Our program is being recorded on Zoom, so feel free to type in any questions during the presentation, which we'll address at the end of the talk. In a couple days, you can watch this and previous programs in a created playlist on our YouTube channel, LWV St. Paul. Some of you may be familiar with the history. Oh, sorry, next slide. Okay, we're ready to start. Some of you may be familiar with the history and culture of Hmong people in Minnesota and Southeast Asia. I'm going to give a brief background, but I also want to make sure that you know that you can find information, probably a little bit more reliable information on other websites, including on the Minnesota Encyclopedia, Minipedia. They have an article, Hmong and Hmong Americans in Minnesota. So from the things we might know, the Hmong are indigenous to China, but also lived in modern-day Vietnam and Laos. At the same time as the Vietnam War, many Hmong worked with the U.S. in the U.S. it's called the U.S. Secret War in Laos. And we know we've heard of that before. So with the next slide, we've got some images here from Minipedia. Because of the work with the U.S. during the U.S. Secret War in Laos, many of the Hmong people became refugees in Thailand and then moving to the United States. Here are some items from the Minnesota Historical Society collection that represent that experience of people moving to Minnesota. We've got some photographs and some moving boxes and the Hmong story cloth in order to represent some of those experiences. Next slide. The first Hmong moved to Minnesota in 1975. Due to refugee resettlement, support from local churches, and other movements, St. Paul and Minnesota have become home to a large population of Hmong, along with California and Ohio, and many other places. I found some clips from some digitized newspapers highlighting news coverage over the years. You can see the welcoming of Hmong students to St. Paul Public Schools in 1980. The open school welcomes Hmong students. A description of the Hmong New Year in November of 2003. It's also next to an image of a couple getting married in costume when it wasn't Halloween. But that is from the Dayton's Bluff Community District Forum. And then we also have a clip of the opening of Hmong Village in December 2010, which is in its same location. You can see that's also from the Dayton's Bluff District Forum in December 2010. So it's fun to see some of the history of the news covering the Hmong people in St. Paul. It's also interesting because most newspapers cannot be digitized yet due to copyright. So it was nice to see these are available on Minnesota Digital Newspaper Archives in order for us to find those. There were some other things too about court cases and other things as well, but I thought these were really interesting. Next slide, thank you. In the League of Women Voters, we often see leadership, we see it in a lot of different ways, but we're closely associated with civic leadership. Over the last 50 years, we've seen many elected officials who are Hmong. Mi Mua was the first Hmong American elected to the state legislature in 2002. She served District 67. Mua's uncle had been elected to the St. Paul Public Schools School Board in 1995. In fact, she worked on his campaign. And Dai Tao was the first Hmong American elected to the St. Paul City Council in 2013. And this is a picture of Mimua and then Dai Tao and Dai Tao's wife and co-campaign manager in 2013. But as we know, leadership isn't only in the civic sphere. So as we commemorate 50 years of Hmong in Minnesota, we invited two leaders to discuss leadership and change. So I would like to introduce Mai Huizel is the founder and executive director of the Hmong Museum. Mai also works as the volunteer and intern program manager, at the Minnesota Historical Society. She sees potential in people and believes that everyone should have the opportunity to tell their own stories from their own voices. I agree, fully agree. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Our other panelist is Kabo Yang, the Senior Strategic Services Consultant for Propel Nonprofits. Yang started consulting in 2010 after many years of working in nonprofits as an executive director, a program manager, and receptionist. And it made me think of how Um, when you work in a nonprofit, you often do all of those jobs at once too. Yang also serves on many boards and teaches at St. Catherine University and at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Welcome and thank you for being here tonight. I wanted to start out this conversation. I've got a couple questions prepared. But audience, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. Those will be relayed and we can share those with our panelists. So thank you. So I've got the first question is, can both of you please tell us a little bit about the work you do in your community? Maya, did you want to start?
Yeah, yes, I can start. Yeah, thank you for having me here today. I am the executive director for Hmong Museum, and when I was in college, I got really excited about how to tell Hmong's history to the next generation because I didn't grow up hearing any of those stories. We didn't learn them in school, and I only heard bits and pieces from my parents. And so I really wanted to give access to everyone to be able to hear these stories and to see them come to life in an exhibition setting in a museum.
And you have a history of working in museums as well. So this wasn't like a new, this wasn't just founding it, right?
Right. This was the seed that got me interested in museums, really, because I didn't know anything about museums, and this is really what kind of spurred me to explore, professional, in the museum world, and so this is what really got me started.
Oh, great. Well, I'm so grateful. Can you tell us where the Hmong Museum is located?
Yeah, so we just got a location. Well, I shouldn't say just. This was about a year ago. We got this location at Hmong Village that you just mentioned. And we have hosted workshops. So it's folk arts workshops and all different kinds of educational kinds of programming in our space. And we have an exhibit at the Hmong Museum right now about Hmong farming. Got some volunteers in to build a Hmong farm home. So this is like a little kind of shack that would be built out in the farm. And so it's just kind of fun to see it in person. Yeah, and we've got a Hmong loom, which not a lot of people have seen in person. And so it's just really exciting to bring these things to the community.
Well, that's so great. I love that. I drive by Hoffa Farms every time I go to my parents' house. So I love to see that there's other opportunities for us to engage with the farmers as well. Thank you. We'll probably come back to talking more about that, but I wanted to give Kabu a chance to talk a little bit about their work in the community as well.
Thank you. I love hearing Mai's work on the Hmong Museum. It's exciting for me. Well, thank you for having me here. The question of my work in the community, I would say I have the privilege of working within multiple community spaces, primarily the Hmong community. And then within that, working around gender justice, working around, immigration, working around just civic engagement. And so I get to do quite a bit of work around that. Um, and then, as Heidi mentioned, I have a long career in nonprofits. So that is part of my community too, which of course includes all kinds of, um, from infrastructure and governance to just program services and deliveries and the different communities in which nonprofits reach out to. And so I get to work in my paid job with nonprofits, but on my volunteer role, I get to work with different community groups. And most recently, I just joined an organization that's really quite new. They're formed in 2024, so about a year old, called the Monk Committee of 100. And it's a 501(c)(4) that is really launched to focus on civic engagement among Americans, but also really creating a space to collect data, tell stories, and inform policies around issues impacting the Hmong community. And then finally, focusing also on how do we support legislators that are, reflective and also um, concerned about Hmong issues, but getting more folks who identify as Hmong into public spaces. And so we had a couple events so far just to talk about the organization to kind of build some momentum, but we're spending this year just building our infrastructure. I'm doing that now. I just stepped off a national board back in September that I was on for 6 years that was focused on refugee services. And so that continues to be an important part to me as well, too. But that's been my work. I've been involved in the community for a long time. It's really shaped who I am. And so I probably get so much more out of it than I give in.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm excited to follow the work that you're doing and to continue to support it. So thank you for sharing that. I did want to say, so St. Paul is sometimes called Saint Small. I remember I realized I became a St. Paulite when I ran into somebody I knew at the grocery store. So it's like seeing somebody out of context, you really become St. Paul. Although we can't know everyone, it is still a pretty big city, but you two do know each other. Can you tell us a little bit about how you know each other? I believe it was a leadership program, right?
That's right. Well, I've met Kabo before. Like when I was in college, I would attend conferences, and she was one of those individuals that would be like, like doing a workshop at those conferences, and always looking up to her. And then a few years ago, I joined the Hmong Women Leadership Institute, and Kabo was one of our teachers, or the main teacher for that, and really just kind of giving us uh, tools and lessons on how to be a leader in the community, and then with this layer of being a Hmong women leader. Yeah, so she's someone that I've looked up to for a long time, and it's fun to be on a panel with her.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya. Yeah, but that leadership program was offered through a nonprofit called Nuchia, Hmong Women Achieving Together. And it was actually created in 2006 as Hmong Women's Action Team in response to the murder suicides that was just, you know, um, running rampant in the Hmong community. And so they were created as a way to access resources, develop advocates, really have a conversation among community about domestic violence and prevention of these murder suicides. And as time went on, they really saw the need for building leaders. And so they created the Hmong Women Leadership Institute. At that time, the only one of its kind around the world that focused on Hmong women, focused on the role of culture and identity in developing leadership, and just creating space to explore leadership, so that we can talk about it, but until we have the space to really hold community conversations, to clarify our values, to really clarify our position on issues in the Hmong community. It was really hard to see ourselves as leaders. And so it was just that space to have that. And so my and so many amazing women have come through, and I have had such a privilege to meet many of them and have them in my life. And so it's been a great journey there too.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So it made me think about, so I did give a little background about the movement and refugees coming to Minnesota, but I wondered if there was anything else you wanted to share about what you know being in the community, something I missed, something I maybe misrepresented. I'd love to make sure that we have, obviously it's not monolithic, but I know that you two have a little bit more experience. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to share some more information.
Well, I just completed and submitted and defended my doctoral dissertation back in December. And so there
Congratulations!
was a whole section on refugees. And so, fresh out of my mind, I can just share a few things. Thank you so much, Heidi. Yeah, so Minnesota, as you all may know, has a disproportionately high number of refugees compared to other states, just because of our resettlement services here. And so a lot of Hmong families came here, right, to Minnesota, and many came through California, New York, and other coastal cities. So there's a large second migration here to Minnesota because of just the social services, and because so many Hmong families were used to living in villages, close to family, close to extended family. That was just a big part of their social system. And so many of them moved here for family, many moved here for employment, many moved here for education. And so St. Paul is also known as the monk capital of the world. And so there's a pretty significant population, the highest concentration here. We're starting to see, and I don't know, Maya, if you see this too, we're starting to see, more monk families move into the first ring suburbs of St. Paul. So Maplewood, Oakdale, Woodbury. But St. Paul still continues to have a large concentration of families, of businesses, and so on. And so We're probably going into our maybe second generation, maybe even third generation now. And, we're starting to get to that stage in, our life cycle as refugees of losing our language, losing our culture. So, of course, what Maya is doing is incredibly important during this time. I have young adult children who are born here, and they're losing the language. And so, it's been a recent project that's been launched, really to focus on how do we standardize the Hmong language so we can teach it in a more consistent way. Currently, there's different curriculum by different schools, different community organizations, and so language is becoming really important as well too. But I would say the pandemic, what arose from it that was positive was this reconnection to Hmong fashion, Hmong design, and Hmong arts. And so we're trying to appreciate these things that we can hold on to, but we also understand that in any kind of these resettlement stages, we don't lose out of culture. And we have fewer refugees now in the community, but still a growing immigrant population, especially as we have family reunifications and spouse visas that are being processed and approved over the last decade or so.
Oh, thank you so much. Maya, is there anything that you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, I think Kabo really touched on all the refugee pieces. And for me, what's really important is seeing the growth and the progress in the community as a refugee group. So you get displaced, you lose that connection, and there's major trauma in the community. And what we're seeing is kind of that rebuilding in the last maybe 10, 15 years with the charter schools. Hmong Museum started in 2015, and so like 10 years ago, this was something that was becoming important for our community. And some of our biggest supporters, like at the very beginning from Hmong Museum, were the young families of parents who wanted to make sure that they were able to provide something for their kids to have that identity, have something to be connected with. And that's how Hmong Museum really started, is with that. So that's the life cycle of kind of that, those where people are as refugees and displaced people. And so we've seen lots of progress in the last 10 years with that.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that there's a museum that exists. Can you talk a little bit about, like, do you have space for collections? I mean, you have this building that you created in this exhibit, but how does that kind of process of building a collection work?
Yeah, it's so do creating a museum is like starting a nonprofit. And and so it's like you've got to kind of start somewhere. And when we first started, we did not have a building, so we were doing lots of partnerships with community organizations and libraries and other museums to do the programming that we wanted to do to share with the community. So we have a very, very small closet for our collections, but it is our dream to have a space, a bigger space to begin collecting and to begin really preserving these items. But also, what we've learned in the last year is that that space is really small, and so there are lots and lots of people interested in learning about the Hmong community, bringing students who are Hmong to the space. And I remembered last fall we had a group that was 120 students, and it was really difficult to guide them into Hmong Village, give them the tour. And they all did great, but it's just really showing us the need in the community is really, really great. And so our hope is to be bigger, and our hope is to find a more permanent space and a bigger space where we can really do this work.
That's great, thank you. And I'm gonna ask you at the end how we can continue to support you. So we're gonna come back to that for sure. I wanted to ask, so again, we've got leadership in the title of this webinar tonight. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what leadership looks like to you. So Kabo, can you start?
Yeah, I feel like that changes all the time, but I feel like for me, it really is about creating change that benefits others, that benefits many. And, my leadership has been focused primarily on equity. And so working on things that create more equity and looking at systems that continue to perpetuate it. And then as leaders is questioning those and creating those systems as needed. And so for me, leadership is really seeking opportunities for equity, addressing challenges that prevent equity, and being able to engage others in that. And so I feel like my leadership cannot be effective without others. And so the importance of relationships, the importance of communications, the importance of, inclusion, are all part of the leadership perspective for me.
Thank you. I feel like that's advice that works across just everything too. Mai, can you share a little bit about what leadership looks like to you?
Yeah, for me, leadership is just stepping up and volunteering or if you want to see change, to make that change, or even um, uh, taking space. When I was younger, I was super shy, and so I'd always like kind of want to blend in. But I'm just I've learned over the years that just stepping up and going in and voicing things that we want to hear or voicing things that we're thinking about. That's ways that we can be leaders, and not to like make things like feel sad, but I just went to a friend's funeral and really learned about her leadership in her family. And so in the Hmong community, there's different ways that Hmong women can be leaders in their own community, in our communities. Even though she was when people spoke about her, they were using her husband's name, but it was always like people were looking to her to help guide them, as someone in their family to give guidance, and so I think of things like that also in our own culturally in our own communities, and how we can make a difference in people's lives.
Oh, thank you so much. So that kind of leads into my next question about change. And I know we've talked about how refugee settlement in Minnesota it's widespread, but that doesn't mean refugees are always feeling welcome in their personal lives. It can be hard day to day. Lots of change, trauma in the past with why they had to move. So I'm just wondering if you think that there has been change in St. Paul. Do people feel welcome here? I mean, I feel welcome, but I also, it took me like 15 years. So,
I think the large Hmong population here helps for folks to feel welcome. I know, when we have friends out of town, either from North Carolina or from Colorado or Texas, they come and it's like, it's so nice to like go around and see other Hmong people. It's nice to see billboards in Hmong. It's nice the other day I was over at Hy-Vee and they had a wedding cake on display and the bride and groom on top were wearing Hmong clothes. So like in that sense, they feel welcome. But there's also, once you leave the Twin Cities, it's different here in Minnesota as well too. And so we also have to warn them that, the sense of welcomeness is sporadic. I think in the Twin Cities because there's much more exposure to the Hmong community. There's certainty, then I feel like there's more integration. There's a sense of welcomeness, but that doesn't apply all the way across the state. And so, but I would say I think overall, the Twin Cities has done a lot to learn about the Hmong community. And the Hmong community, as Mai has referred to, has taken up space as well too. And so in doing so, they have shown their presence. And so that's um, great opportunities for I think much more inclusion of the Hmong experience, the Hmong perspective.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I remember the first time I learned about the Hmong movement to Minnesota as refugees and just learning that like Hmong didn't have a country to move from. So like hearing some of those stories and stuff was something very new to me, and I'm very grateful for people to be able to share that so I can learn too. So thank you. Mai, did you want to add anything about has there been change in St. Paul? Is St. Paul welcoming?
Yeah, yeah, I would echo everything that Kabo has shared. Something for me that I noticed in really in just the last 5, 6 years is you mentioned Dai Tao being the first council person, Hmong person, and now we've got, several and representatives and senators in office. And so I've seen a shift in conversations within, even my own family with the elder men, adults who are, kind of talking about that kind of civic leadership and wanting and seeing that possibility and then wanting to see more of that from, the younger generations. Um, and from my own personal experience, starting the Hmong Museum, I mean, I needed to get the kind of support from everyone in the community because I think it's really important. And I remembered at the very beginning, it was really hard to get some of that support from, especially older men, especially from men. And also because I was unmarried at the time, there's like the status where if you're not married, you're not really an adult yet, and so just kind of fighting through some of that. And really, in the last couple of years, I've really seen a shift in the ways that leaders in our community are talking about things and opening up to having more diverse kinds of leaders. There's still a lot of work to do, but I'm really seeing that kind of welcome from the community, as someone who's leading the Hmong Museum and just being like okay with it. And so in both of those ways, I'm really seeing that shift. And it's exciting to see because it's only happened in the last couple of years, in the last maybe 10 years.
Well, thank you so much. That does equally lead into the next question. We did get a question in the chat from one of our audience members about, would you be willing to share a little bit about your personal experiences growing up? And then with that, thinking about some of the more what Mai was saying about the change in leadership and community involvement, et cetera, from when you were growing up. I know it's sometimes hard when we're kids, like we're very much in our own world. But then as we grow up, we all have studied the history of this, so we know like how that change has happened as well. So would you be willing to share some of your personal history with that as well? And your like role, your journey to leadership.
Maybe you want to start on that one? Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, so I like I was saying, I mean, I got into museums because I thought I could be in a basement with all the collections. And so that's really what, I thought I was gonna do, not be in kind of a position where, I would be talking to lots of people or doing the work that I'm doing as executive director for Hmong Museum. And so for me growing up, that was always kind of um, uh, uh, my struggle, right? And I'm also the oldest in my family. And so, whenever there's any questions from my parents, if they needed interpretation, all of those things, I would have to step up and really kind of help with that. I still do that, right? And so, kind of being placed in that role. Um, and so personally, that's just kind of how I grew up. And, taking on this role with Hmong Museum, it was a huge learning experience for me because it doesn't come naturally to me. For example, when I was in college and grad school, like, I was so scared that the teacher would call on me. I mean, I was already in my 20s, right? Like I could hear my heart thumping in the classrooms, that was how shy I was. And then to be able to just kind of, be, pushed into this role and learning, how to talk to people and learning, how to uh 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 to do presentations, all those sorts of things, those kind of skills were things that I just had to kind of learn. And it's not something that I had learned, when I was growing up. So that's, I guess, a little bit about how I got into this position, how I got into this role. I don't know if that answered all of your questions because there was a lot of little bits and pieces in there.
Yeah, sorry, that one was a bit long-winded. So thank you. I think it did. Unless you wanted to expand a little bit more on kind of the observations you made in the community and the community that the part where you grew up in, and if there was change in leadership or um, community involvement and things like that too.
Yeah, I think that we had a lot of really great pioneers like early on when Hmong refugees came in and started some, social work that Kabo has referenced as well. And they're the people who really kind of set the stage for me as like this young person growing up here. I was born and raised in St. Paul, so my parents were refugees, but I wasn't, and so I remembered as a kid going on a march for having more awareness around domestic violence in St. Paul. And that was all led by some of the um, who I'm calling elders now. They're the first, the pioneers. And so I think that really set the stage for a lot of the work in the Twin Cities of leaders and civic leadership and all those kinds of things were from those really early pioneers.
Thank you. Kabo, could you share a little bit about your journey to leadership and
Yeah,
some of the change you've seen over time?
sure, sure. And I'm gonna, cross over to some of my points too. I would say, her shyness, my shyness, were all, I think, habituated to our culture. And so among girls growing up, we were not encouraged to speak up. We were not encouraged to speak out. We were not encouraged to have our own opinion, our own voice. And so, I had a little different situation. I'm an only daughter. I have three brothers. And so I tend to took up a lot of space. And my parents were supportive of that. Not always, but I did. And I think growing up, I always felt like I had a voice. And I also want to give a lot of credit to my teachers. I remember my teachers from kindergarten through first, second, third grade, and all the way through elementary school. They always made me feel safe in speaking up and asking questions. And my name is Cabo, and so of course that was always mispronounced. A lot of teasing, and they always comforted me and made me feel included. And so I'll always have a soft spot for teachers, and so all the educators out there. I know it's not easy, but you're changing lives, and so hang in there. So yeah, so the school, my teachers were always really good support for me to help me find my voice. Um, and then it wasn't until high school, and I think we see this in a lot of schools too, as I began to hang out with more Hmong kids. Because growing up, I actually went to a gifted and talented school, and so it was majority white students, and it was probably a handful of Asian students. And so as high school, I saw more Hmong students, and I began also at that point be more aware of gender differences. I did always know that my parents were different than my brothers, that was just within our family. But hearing other girls talk about, oh, I can't stay after school, or I can't go on that college visit. It just began to, I think that was a spark that really made me think about what change can I do? If this isn't, I don't like this, and I think a lot of us like this, and so that was where I think I really began to find my voice and what change I wanted to see. Also at that point, beginning to be exposed to these leaders that Maya is referring to, who I saw was addressing domestic violence, which at that time we observed, sadly, in many households, who were speaking out against it, who were, um, yeah, and so it was them that allowed me to see myself as a leader as well too, and making a difference. And so that's where it really began. And from there, I just continued to seek opportunities to make a difference, and whether it was going to college or volunteering or, I also went through the same leadership program that mine went through. I was in our inaugural cohort before I became a facilitator, and it was also there where I had the space to really map out what difference I could make, and so be much more intentional on what that is, and so on. And so it's really been, and I, as I mentioned, I have three brothers, and I have around me just women that continue to uplift me, continue to teach me, and I've just been surrounding myself with women, gosh, since I was probably in high school, and they've just been a force for me to be who I am and to hold me accountable, but also to continue to teach and to mentor me to this day. And so I would say that all the different jobs I've had was because of a woman, all these different boards, all these different, when I was doing contract work on my own, all those were referred and connected to me by other women. And so I certainly value that and the importance of having that kind of sisterhood. And so that's also shaped me and who I am and kind of how I approach the world as well too. And so that's been my journey. My mom was quite traditional. She was really my dad's wife, and that was how she saw the world. And I think for her and I, we're quite different in that way. But she, in her mixed messages, supported me in terms of going to college as a married woman. Having a professional occupation and going to happy hour, with colleagues, which, isn't quite understood by a lot of Hmong elders of what happy hour is, all these team outings that are not work related. But yeah, she supported me in doing that. My dad, quite traditional, but also a huge advocate for my education. And so even during my first marriage, when my husband wasn't very supportive of me going to college, he was. He said she's going to college, it's only going to benefit your family. Why do you not, want to encourage her? And so I was doing that my parents certainly made some sacrifices and negotiated some cultural obligations for me to do what I do. So continue to just be grateful for that. And that not everybody has the same situation. And so how can I support them in ways that um, encourages them versus discouraging them? And so my parents, the women around me, my teachers were all big parts of my development.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, thank you for referencing that march. I did find that it was referenced in one of those newspapers that I saw as well. So thank you. And it was just really interesting to see. I hadn't known about it, so I was really excited to learn more. But you've both talked about kind of culture and the change that we see because of moving and having to move the refugee. So we have a question from the audience. If you could talk a little bit about schools. We've got a lot of specialty schools, charter schools, and I know like even St. Paul Public Schools has some focused areas. But can you talk a little bit about balancing assimilation and maintaining culture in in groups and community and things like that a little bit? Because there's also pushes for like specialized East Asian schools. I'm sorry, East African schools. We've got that new school that opened up in St. Paul this fall. So you could talk a little bit about that balance, which seems like we're constantly working with.
Yeah, so I've worked with different schools through Hmong Museum, and especially schools that are trying to, not all of them are charter schools. Some of them just have like Hmong language or dual language immersions and that sort of thing. But what I'm seeing is uh, from the students, right, from the young kids, what I'm seeing is just a lot more engagement from them. Um, with their families, with the elders in their families, because this is in their schools, because they have access to it. A lot of it is, trying to maintain the language. Language, I think, is the one of the more difficult things to kind of keep up, especially if their parents are also individuals who speak mostly Hmong. It's really hard to maintain the language in the home, and then at school it's not very if it's not taught in the school, it's hard to learn that unless it's someone who's just really interested in language in general. One of the classes that I went to where they wanted to learn pandao, which is a flower cloth technique with cross stitching and Hmong symbols, and none of the students knew that each other were at the school because they're all in different classes. And so this was the first time that they brought all the students together, and all of the students were saying, "Oh, you're Hmong? Oh, you're Hmong," to each other. And they were so excited to share with me their experience going to Hmong New Year, right? Because they knew I'm Hmong, and so they know I would understand, what it's like to go to the Hmong New Year with their families. And it had just happened like the weekend before. And the teachers were just really delighted by that because they hadn't heard their students talk about Hmong New Year. And then the students also learned a couple of Hmong words when I was teaching the cross stitching to them. And so just having that access to um, the cultural learning in the schools, I think, is so important. And with the push and pull of assimilation, I mean, it is important to know, to learn English, to know all the things that we got to know in elementary school. But I think there are a lot of ways in which we can inform the learning through these cultural lens, and to incorporate, things like art, and to incorporate history and language into the schools. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that we can do that.
Mhm. Thank you. And Hmong wasn't a written language until comparatively recently, right?
That's
So it's
right.
Yeah,
very
for
much
the
an oral. Yeah,
1950s. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Kabo, I cut you off.
No, no, no. I won't add too much because I cover quite a bit of it, but I certainly like that the schools they continue to think about how do they balance because there are schools that still teach the reading curriculum, the math curriculum, the English curriculum, but they also have a teaching of Hmong history, Hmong culture, Hmong language. And so it's really an enhancement and not a replacement of the current curriculum. But it can teach you about, what is that balance? What is that balance in terms of language and culture? And I was just, saying earlier that I'm part of this project that's trying to look at how do we have a consistent curriculum so that it can be a little bit easier to do the balance, that a school doesn't have to for themselves figure out, is it too much monocultural language? Is it not enough? What is it? And so having some consistency helps to balance that out too. So there's progress that continues to be made, but also room for improvement as well.
I'm really excited about that too, because we know that students also can benefit from seeing themselves in their curriculum. And we know that for so long, many haven't seen themselves. So I hope that students can start seeing that and then blossom, whether they want to continue learning or build careers somehow and just be engaged citizens in their community too. So thank you. We've talked a little bit about the newspapers and coverage that we've seen. If you could talk, this is another question from our audience. If you could talk a little bit about how you feel the press and media coverage of Hmong issues in the state and the US, like maybe that's changed too over the years, or maybe it's just consistent with how the media covers everybody. So you could talk a little bit, and if there's any certain media or press that's maybe we should start following. Because I believe there's a Hmong TV
Yeah.
channel, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a pretty active media group that is just wonderful. They are in a lot of community events, both educational events, social events, cultural events. Yeah, I would say the media, it's definitely changed over the years. It's changed in that I think, as we have more Hmong in the media, they're creating that connection between the Hmong and the media. I think for a long time, Hmong were consumers of the media and not much of a participant. And I think they're seeing themselves now as participants. I'll say in my work with nonprofits, I work with a lot of course, Hmong organizations and other Southeast Asian organizations, other immigrant organizations, so East African, West African organizations. Um, we're still working on how do we build relationships with the media so that there are these opportunities to tell their stories that's coming from them, and also tell stories that are positive, that are educational, that are inviting versus, when we hear about murder, suicides, or we hear about, these negative things. And so I certainly think there's more room to grow in terms of having more positive news and celebrating successes. I think that, we have a very rich arts and culture environment here in the Twin Cities. We have festivals, we have so many things that the media's got much better at being at those events. So I think the media certainly has become more involved, more educated, more informed, and also really highlighting some positive things that are happening in immigrant communities as well.
Thank you. I love that going from like consumers to participants as well. I appreciate that was really great. Thank you. Mai, did you have any more to add?
Probably not much more than that. I just know that there's more reporters who are reaching out to Hmong Museum, for example, and wanting to build that relationship with us so that we can share more of our stories out. And so there there are more reporters, I think, who are becoming much more aware of cultural organizations or even just like different community groups that they really should keep an eye on and be able to report on.
Mhm.
So I did warn you I was going to ask this. We at the League of Women Voters St. Paul love a good book. We've got a couple book clubs. So if you have any books to recommend about either that, I mean, it can be related or unrelated. I take all recommendations, but any books that you recommend related to Hmong history or Hmong community or Hmong arts and culture as well. I know we've mentioned that Kabo Yang, we've read The Late Homecomer. We also recently read The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down about the young child in California who is experiencing going through the medical system with that language barrier and such. So if you have any other recommendations, we will take them. Are you going to publish any books soon?
I take a deep breath because as I just mentioned, I just finished my dissertation in December. So I've only been reading like research books. And so I have this huge list of like books to read for fun. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking at my bookcase. I've got a ton of books here. Mostly a lot of it is still research related. Um, yeah, but Calcalia, she's great. She's a great author. Um, they're both at, I think both at Hmong Village, there's a monk bookstore,
Oh,
called
great.
Monk ABC. Yep, and so both of them, they have, educational books, fiction. We're seeing a lot of children's books come out now, as a way to teach young Hmong children about their culture, but also in general that can be used in classrooms. But yeah, I wish I had a recommendation, but probably when I have some time to do some leisure reading, I'll send some your way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was noticing on social media a publisher called Her Publisher.com, and they have some really interesting titles. And I'm also noticing that, just some of the authors that they're publishing are individuals in the community that I'm like, oh, that's awesome that they've written, this book and they're published. So this is, I believe, a Hmong publisher. And one of the earliest books, like when I was in college, that I wasn't involved with or anything, but that really got me thinking more about creative writing, because that was one track I thought I was going to do was creative writing. It's called Bamboo Among the Oaks, and this is one of the early published Hmong Southeast Asian uh, poetry books by Mai Ning Moore. And she's the editor and, tons of other authors in that book. And so that just kind of like is a little bit nostalgic for me. That's one of the very, very early published Hmong poetry books.
That's great. Thank you. So
And
we've got a, oh, sorry.
that actually makes me think about a recent anthology by Dr. Potter Vang.
Oh,
Mai, do you
yeah.
remember what her book is called? What is it called? Yeah, so she has an anthology of just stories by different authors. Um, yeah, I'll try to find her the title of the book, but Dr. Potter Vang, she's a professor over at St. Catherine University, was an editor for a book that is an anthology.
Oh, great. Thank you. And then when we repost this video, we can definitely link to it. All of these books too. So we've got just a few minutes left and there's a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So there's um two that I wanted to make sure to ask, and then if we have some time afterwards, I can continue with those two. But one, is there something you wanted to share about your experience or the work that you're doing that we haven't discussed yet? And if there isn't, then that's fine too.
One of the things for me and for Hmong Museum that we're really focused on is that 50-year commemoration of Hmong and Southeast Asians immigrating and coming to the United States. It's a huge, I think, opportunity to do more outreach with tons of Southeast Asian community organizations and to really learn a little bit more about some of the long-lasting effects of war and trauma that comes with that, that's still continuing in our communities, as well as progress, right? A lot of progress, but so many things to look forward to. There will probably be a ton of things happening in the community surrounding the 50th commemoration. And I'm on a couple of little committees and groups that are putting some of those things together. And for Hmong Museum, what we're doing this year and we just got this grant, and so I'm really, really happy about it, is to do a story mapping project. To really record different stories around the state of either like things that events that have happened or the first Hmong store or the first whatever. It doesn't have to be the first, but just that's like different examples that we have. And so I'm really excited about that. And those are things that are going to be coming up in the next probably the next couple of months really soon here.
That's great. So we should all keep our eyes out for programs and task forces and other events and things to pay attention to. Wonderful. Thank you. Kabo, do you have anything else you wanted to share about the work that you're doing, your community, your experience?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot going on at this time. I mean, again, I'm with this new organization. I'm learning. I mean, I've known of the legal women voters for a while, and as we learn about candidate forums, as we learn about these kinds of things, I'm certainly looking to the League of Women Voters model, and so just wanting to appreciate you all for being there, but also that I'm on this learning journey, and so we're again learning. I'm actually doing a workshop at the Hmong National Development Conference coming up in April. It's a national conference that has been on for a long time and it's moved around the country and it's back in Minnesota in April. We're doing a workshop on running for office. And so trying to, one, um, share the history of just Hmong people in office and the progression of that, but also what is it like to run a campaign? What's it like to be elected officials? We have a city council person, a state representative, and we also have a Ramsey County commissioner. And then we also have someone from Wisconsin who's school board and county board to come talk about different levels of government. It's just continuing to think about civic engagement, public leadership, and how those key decisions can impact communities.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I'm so excited for you. I hope it goes just wonderful. And what a plethora of experience that's going to be in one room. I'm really excited. Um, I also wanted to make sure to ask, um, what's your hope for the future of the Hmong people in Minnesota?
So, Hmong Museum's like first mission, which we're still operating on, but we have a new mission or vision now. One of our first visions was that we would have a thriving community in that's also learning and continuing to learn about Hmong culture. And so that's still, I think, what I hope for is to continue to see people thrive because even as we see lots of progress, there's still lots of people and individuals in our community that need that help and need to be uplifted. And so that's what I'm hoping for is just that everyone can rise up together.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would say I think my hope is that no matter where folks go, that they can embrace their Hmong identity. Having no land makes it hard for us to be a people, but if we can have the culture, we can have the history, we can have the experience that we can say that we share together. And so I really want folks to embrace their identity and that it shows up in everything they do, in their leadership and their advocacy and their just being a neighbor in the community, they're able to embrace their identity and share it with others.
Okay, and last question of the night before I close out the slides. How can we continue to support you and your organizations and the work that you're doing? Somebody pointed out in the chat to make sure this is a blatant plug to go visit the Hmong Museum for sure. Please go visit it. So if you wanted to share any opening hours off the top of your head or anything, but also what are other ways that we can continue to support you and your organizations and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, do come visit us. Our galleries are open Saturday and Sundays, 10 to 4. We're located at Hmong Village, so you can come visit us and then explore the market and get some Hmong food. Yeah, so definitely come in and visit us there. And yeah, if you want to stay up to date on the happenings at Hmong Museum, you can join us or like us on Facebook. That's where we really kind of share the most information out into the community. And then if you want to be on our mailing list, you can just let me know and I can add you on and you'll receive the newsletters.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I think I am also a St. Paulite. I grew up in St. Paul and went through the whole school system there. And I would say outside of St. Paul and Minneapolis, and outside of like Minnesota, not many people know about Hmong people. And so I just ask you all to help us, tell our story, in spaces, whether it's family, friends, neighbors. I remember working for a pretty significant local nonprofit. We had 120 employees, and many of them had never met a Hmong person before because they lived in Minnetonka, they lived in Chaska, they drove to downtown Minneapolis, went back to Chaska, wherever, shopped there, play there. And so I was like the first Hmong person they met. And so just the awareness of no matter, even though we feel like there's a lot of Hmong people, outside of the Twin Cities. There's not that many. And so, um, just really telling the story. There's still a lot of, I think, misunderstanding of why the Hmong people are here, the connection to the U.S. military, their role in the Vietnam War as, as GU veterans. We also have an aging veteran population. The Hmong community of 100 did a small celebration this past Veterans Day for them. Um, and we found out it was the first time that the Hmong community had a Veterans Day celebration. And I was just like, how did this go like this? And so, um, but yeah, just understanding, why the Hmong are here and helping us just to be advocates and educators this really helps us so that when they do see us, they can certainly feel like, oh, that's someone that we're familiar with.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you both for being here and sharing and um, talking about your stories and your experiences and what you think about leadership and how you've seen that in the community and in St. Paul and the work that you're doing. I'm so excited. I think we're going to have to do this again next year. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be talking about 51 years. So with that, I also wanted to ask our viewers if we could take a quick photo of our upcoming programs. These are what's coming up in February, March, April, and May. And then we have our St. Paul annual meeting in June. So next month, we're talking about arts. St. Paul Vitality Arts Lead the Way. In March, we will be visited with Michael Osterholm talking about pandemics and epidemics. It will be virtual because we don't want to be a super spreader event. So we know that lots of things are going around. I've got a friend who's down with COVID now, and I had norovirus earlier. So probably shouldn't be saying that on something that's going to go on YouTube, but I did anyway. So we are going to be doing that one virtually. And then we're hoping to gather in person, maybe outside for Earth Day. The League is fully committed to a nonpartisan nature while educating the public on candidates, as well as promoting reliable and secure elections for our country. For more than 100 years, we study issues, We take positions and we take action. Once you become a member, then you will receive lots of invitations to take action at a national, a state, and a local level. So you can check out our website to learn more about membership in the League of Women Voters St. Paul. We always welcome new members throughout the year, so please give us a try. Again, we are grateful to Roseville and White Bear Lake area leagues for their support tonight. Roseville is doing lots of great work, so make sure you check out their calendars, and White Bear Lake area as well. Roseville has lots of programs at the Roseville Public Library, so you can check that out. We also would like to thank SCC-TV and the St. Paul Neighborhood Network for broadcasting the program. So have a great evening, and remember to go visit the Hmong Museum and follow our panelists tonight and continue to support the work that they're doing. Thank you.